On June 25th, 2015, a channel by the name of Obscure Horror Corner uploaded a video of a game named Sad Satan. Allegedly, the game originates from the deep web, a portion of the internet inaccessible without the use of a special web browser with hundreds of thousands of unindexed sites hidden from the world. According to legend, Obscure Horror Corner downloaded the game from an Onion link using Tor that a subscriber gave him. He then documented his experience to put onto his YouTube channel. According to the Kotaku article written about the game, the subscriber who wished to remain anonymous received the link off of a deep web forum site, and the only thing that could indicate a potential creator was the initials used signing off the initial post. Those initials were ZK. Between June 25th and July 4th, 2015, Obscure Horror Corner uploaded playthroughs of the game. This would be his final batch of uploads before an inactive period that still hasn't been broken. But that's not even close to the tip of the iceberg surrounding this game. So what is Sad Satan? Why does it exist? Is it really from the deep web, and who's responsible for its creation? In Sad Satan Part 1, the video starts off blurry and we're walking down some corridor. Faint footsteps can be heard. When the end of the hallway is reached, audio both distorted and reversed begins to play. The reversed audio sounds like this when played normal. I couldn't tell you what it is, as it seems a tad bit too distorted. As the audio repeats itself, the player aimlessly wanders until he comes across another hallway, and the audio begins to become even deeper. As they make their way down this hallway, the game slows and shows this photo for a fraction of a second, accompanied with creepy, unsettling tones. I have no real idea what this means, and it could be a slightly cheap jump scare for effect. I say that because the photo has an atmosphere of unsettling energy to it, mostly because it's so random and makes almost no sense. He continues down the hallway accompanied by these unsettling tones that won't go away. The reverse voice from earlier eventually comes back and the game slows down once more. The audio cuts and we're left in darkness until we see lines light up, directing our attention. As the player strides down the hallway, we are met with silence. This pattern repeats until a new room is found at the end, and we can audibly hear the term Sad Satan being played over and over again. When reversed, it's actually revealed to be a very short snippet from Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, which is slightly ironic given the name. A lot of people attribute Sad Satan to be about child abuse due to the fact that as this audio clip is playing, a black and white photo appears bearing the phrase NSPCC is great. The NSPCC is the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children in the UK. On an off note, the video ends once the end of the hallway is reached. The hallway itself is creepy in its own right, being fairly claustrophobic as well as having what I assume to be blood on the floor. And that pretty much concludes episode 1. Episode 2 was released just 2 days later on June 27th and opens the exact same way episode 1 did. Abruptly. The player walks down the hallway until they come across a door. Once they come across this door, there's text that reads, "Rescue with key, suffering." Then the door is revealed to be locked. As the player makes their way down the hallway, we're presented with another very odd image, and I honestly couldn't tell you what it means. Continuing on, we see something ahead and we hear more distorted audio. This time, we get subtitles. The subtitles read, "In nomine de nostri Satanas Luciferi excelsi," which translates in Latin to, "In the name of our God, Satan, Lucifer the Most High." The player turns around and begins walking the opposite direction. After squeezing through a small passage, another image flashes on the screen. This time it's JFK on the day of his assassination. After this, we see the player making their way down the hallway, and at the end of the hallway we see a glowing room. Once the player finally reaches this room, the game throws the player into darkness. More reversed audio begins playing as the player looks around the room. Eventually, after observing their surroundings for a bit, the player makes their way back to the glowing room. This time, the room doesn't throw the player anywhere. Once inside the room, the player observes the spheres on the wall that are glowing, only to reveal that the walls have eyes. The player spends a few moments in this room attempting to figure it out, and the eyes on the walls begin either glitching out or moving sporadically. After a while, the player begins to make their way back down the hallway. Once they turn, more audio begins playing. It seems to be a distorted speech of sorts. After a while, we finally come to a door. After opening this door, the player enters and observes their surroundings. Then the player realizes what appears to be a crying child standing behind them. Once the player observes this child closely, it is revealed to have a quite disturbing face. Randomly, it screams, scaring the player. The player runs out of the door and down the hallway, only to hear the screaming more. Eventually, he escapes it, running and running, only to run back into the glowing room. Now he's surrounded by the same entity he was running away from. As he begins to leave, the video slows and distorts, before abruptly ending. Video number 3 was uploaded 3 days after on June 30th. The video starts off in a room, and as the player progresses, we're met with this encoded message. Thanks to a Reddit user, we know that this string of text is kill, 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 and kill again. The player eventually makes their way to this hallway again with the skybox, only there seems to be missing components to it. As the player surveys the area, we get text reading patience and why, and then we hear a monologue from Charles Manson himself. A good portion of the video is just listening to this speech, but it finally ends at the 7:04 mark. Soon the player is wandering around more dark hallways, this time with a lamp. Another white message comes up, which translates to "You are on my list." A minute or so goes by as the character aimlessly walks into what seems like a void before we hear Charles Manson repeatedly saying,
"If I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left."
Suddenly, another white message appears on the screen. This message translates to 5 victims, hail 666, sad people died. As the player continues running, text saying stop this appears. Then another white message, this time reading, "I can track you. Good luck. You're alone. Buried. Help me." Finally, the video ends by cutting to a still image of the glowing room with some backwards music. Part 4, uploaded on July 3rd, starts with the player walking down a corridor. The player continues walking down this corridor until they reach a door, but the player decides not to go through the door and instead continues down the hallway. Then this image is flashed. The player eventually goes through the door from earlier and is stuck in a narrow hallway where reversed audio begins playing.
So how are you gonna go about this massacre?
I don't know. I just want to make a film of it. On film, I'd like to kill Jimmy Savile. I think he's a hypocrite. I bet he's into all kinds of seediness that we all know about but are not allowed to talk about. I know some rumors.
This reversed audio is a segment taken from a 1978 interview with John Lydon, in which he describes that he would like to kill Jimmy Savile for rumors that he's heard. This comes back to child abuse, because the man in the NSPCC's great photograph from earlier standing next to Margaret Thatcher is Jimmy Savile, who has numerous child abuse allegations. It's safe to assume that this game, Sad Satan, is definitely targeting abuse. The player makes their way to another door where they enter and realize that there's a man staring at a wall. There's no jump scare here, and the player backs out, returning to the hallway. In the hallway, we hear the same reverse clip from the beginning. The player continues wandering until they come across another door with a red hallway. In this room, the player picks up a key. After opening the locked door, the player is greeted with text saying everyone is ready for the party. After this, it seems as though the player walks out into a void where there's no more hallway, just a skybox. Eventually, a different version of the game with a bunch of white lines loads up. As the player further explores, this image appears. This is a photo of the Otaku Killer. This game has a fascination with these types of figures. After this, the player continues walking down the hall, only to be met with this image after being told to come in and have some fun, which is unsettling given the context of the game so far. After this, the player makes their way into a big room where we see the figures from previous episodes before we get the flashes of the same 2 images, bringing the video to an abrupt end. The final episode, Part 5, was uploaded on July 4th, 2015. The video begins with the player running down a long corridor before coming to a stop in front of a wall. We get several images flashed at us. First of this one, an image of Roman Polanski, who's wanted in the US for statutory rape. And second of this photo, which appears to be a satanic ritual at the Stonehenge. Both of these tie in with the overall theme of the game itself. The player continues to wander as things become more and more distorted before eventually the game cuts to black. Then we hear a scream and the game comes back. The player aimlessly continues walking and the video ends. Without warning and with no resolution to the game itself, it ends. And this was the last video of the game, and from the channel, ever to be posted. Before this portion of the video starts, I do want to come out and say that what I'm about to tell you is not officially recognized as part of what is considered to be the Sad Satan incident in 2015. So assume this to be speculation, and please do not litter the Sad Satan subreddit with anything I'm about to get into. Around the time Sad Satan was booming in popularity, a Reddit account by the name of ScareBearZK began commenting on a creepy gaming post surrounding the game. Now, no one would have cared much for his cryptic comments if it wasn't for his initials at the end of his name. Keep in mind the Kotaku article from earlier where the person behind Obscure Horror Corner was interviewed. He claimed that he found the game initialed with ZK. Now, after comparing the dates of the comments to the article, ScareBearZK's Reddit account was only made 2 days after the Kotaku article was even released, meaning that there was almost no credibility to this. It could have very easily been a troll or some kind of game jack. But there is one thing that's kinda hard to explain, and that's this from Scarebear's YouTube account. A video titled Sad Sad Satan, an incoherent mess that makes almost no real sense. And the video wouldn't have been significant at all if it wasn't for the fact that the video itself was uploaded on May 8th, 2013, 2 years before we would have ever heard of the game from Obscure Horror Corner. And this is where things get a hell of a lot more interesting. In the description, we're told to follow the trail. If we assume that this Scarebear is the same Scarebear from Reddit, then we can look at this comment. County Road 2100 block, Friday, December 14th, 2001. The truth is stranger than fiction. Searching this brings us to an old article of a girl who was involved in a drunk driving accident on Friday, December 14th, 2001, exactly on the road that was commented. The article mentions that she died near Woodrow Road. This is a very important detail, one that allows us to follow the trail as we've been instructed to. Doing a search on Scarebear's handle on Google will give us a number of interesting results, but the one we're looking for is titled Woodrow, a short story written on Wattpad by Scarebear about abuse, and allegedly is based on true events. Things get way more disturbing, however, when you realize that the man behind Scarebear, named Gary Graves, was arrested for possession of child pornography. Gary Graves is from Lubbock, Texas, the exact same place where County Road 2100 block and Woodrow Road is, and the exact same place where that girl died. We know that Gary Graves is behind Scarebear because on his YouTube channel, his name comes up in the credits of his most recent video. And it gets even more disturbing when you realize and understand that the corrupted version of Sad Satan is rumored to have that kind of content in it, along with gore and the usual satanic subliminalism. However, before we assume that Graves is responsible for anything to do with Sad Satan itself, I do believe it's important to examine the other possibility. The possibility that Graves himself is a fraud and an ARG hijacker. Woodrow, his Wattpad story, was last updated on July 23rd, 2015, weeks after his original comment about County Road 2100. His YouTube account has been inactive for 5 years, and as for the video about Sad Sad Satan, it's entirely possible that he took what was a random incomprehensible mess and turned the title into something that resembled Sad Satan. It's not that hard to edit titles on YouTube. But what we learn from this story, this tiny little conspiracy involving Scarebear himself, is a lesson that should be widely known. You never really know who's out there, staring back at you from across the screen. Whether they've been your online friend for years or you assume them to be part of a creation of some satanic game, you never truly know what it is you're looking into or who it is that you're chatting with. Which is why it's extremely important to always be safe when online, whether it's in the ARG and horror community or elsewhere. And that's where Sad Satan leaves us. Officially, it's a game created by Obscure Horror Corner as an ARG with Terror Engine and contains some subliminal satanic messages that aren't necessarily meant to be taken seriously. Unofficially, a broader online conspiracy that's held together by coincidences and is very likely to be fake. And in a lot of ways, that's what keeps the mystery of Sad Satan so enticing and keeps the conversation going on and on. And if you find yourself lurking the corners of the internet with nothing to do and want to give the game itself a shot, please do not search for it. Use the subreddit endorsed version that I've provided a link for in the description. Not only are there versions of the game that are rumored to have disgusting and terrible content, but they're packed with viruses. Stay safe, and remember, you were warned.